So there's this clip from 2012 where Linus Torvalds, the guy who literally created Linux, just straight up gives NVIDIA the middle finger on stage. And he says, quote, "NVIDIA has been the single worst company we've ever dealt with." Now, this is a guy who works with thousands of companies. Microsoft, Google, Intel, he's fine with all of them. But NVIDIA, he flips them off. And here's the thing, that was 13 years ago. The war is still going, and it's getting worse. Let me show you why. If you've ever used an NVIDIA GPU on Linux, you already know. You buy a $1,500 NVIDIA card. Top tier. You're hyped. You install Linux, boot up, and your screen is tearing. Half the screen is one frame, the other half is another. It looks broken. So you Google it, you find a forum post from 2015, it says add this to your X11 config. You don't know what X11 is. You do it anyway. It doesn't work. 3 hours later, you're in the terminal, copy-pasting Reddit commands, hoping you don't nuke your system. And maybe it works until you suspend your laptop. And it never wakes up again. Meanwhile, your friend with AMD plugged it in. It worked. That's it. No configs, no terminal. It just worked. And it's not just gaming. AI training? Pain. Multi-monitor? Pain. Wayland. The future of Linux? NVIDIA ignored it for 5 years. And here's the crazy part. NVIDIA makes the best GPUs on Earth, worth $3 trillion. And Linux drivers? Still a mess. Okay, so here's where it really gets interesting. And it is worth slowing down here, because this part actually matters. NVIDIA is not stupid. They are not sitting in a room laughing about how to make Linux users miserable. That idea feels good, but it is not true. NVIDIA has very specific reasons for the way they treat Linux, and once you understand those reasons, you realize this is not really about Linux at all. It is about money and control. Start with the numbers. Linux gamers make up roughly 3% of Steam users. From NVIDIA's perspective, that is tiny. Every hour an engineer spends fixing Linux drivers is an hour not spent improving performance on Windows, where the overwhelming majority of their customers actually are. From a business point of view, the math is simple, but that is not even the biggest reason. The bigger issue is that NVIDIA's drivers are closed source. You cannot see the code, and that is completely intentional. The GeForce drivers that gamers use share code with NVIDIA's professional cards, like Quadro and Tesla. Those are the $10,000 GPUs used by movie studios, research labs, and AI companies. That is where the real money comes from. If NVIDIA opened up their gaming drivers, they would also be exposing how their professional hardware actually works. Computers could study it. Developers could copy performance techniques. Over time, NVIDIA's competitive advantage would slowly disappear. And then there is CUDA. If you have ever worked with AI or machine learning, you already know how important it is. CUDA only works on NVIDIA GPUs, and NVIDIA has spent more than a decade making sure universities, researchers, and companies build everything around it. That lock-in is incredibly valuable. If everything were opened up, that lock-in would start to weaken. So from NVIDIA's point of view, this is not a mistake. It is not negligence. It is the business model. Keep things closed, keep customers dependent, and keep the money flowing. But here is what they did not expect. The Linux community has a saying, we have a particular set of skills, and we will find you, and we will replace you. Okay, they don't actually say that, but they might as well. Because while NVIDIA was ignoring them, something started happening. February 2022, Valve releases the Steam Deck. It runs Linux, uses an AMD GPU, and it's actually good, like really good. Suddenly, Linux gaming isn't a joke anymore, and Valve didn't beg NVIDIA to help. They just went to AMD and said, hey, you want to work together? And AMD said yes, because AMD's drivers are open source. They actually want people to contribute and improve them. Now here's the beautiful irony. NVIDIA makes most of their money from AI and data centers now, not gaming. So NVIDIA is in this hilarious position where they're making billions from the Linux ecosystem while simultaneously giving it the middle finger. And developers hate them for it. Meanwhile, the Linux community just kept building. There's this project called Nouveau, an open source NVIDIA driver that volunteers have been working on since 2005. For 20 years, people have been reverse engineering NVIDIA's hardware in their spare time with zero help from NVIDIA just to make these GPUs work on Linux. And in 2023, they released NVK, a new Vulkan driver. And it actually works. Like, really works. Think about that. Volunteers working in their spare time with zero inside information, reverse engineering $1 trillion company's hardware, and they've achieved 70 to 80% of the proprietary driver's performance. That's not just impressive. That's a threat. NVIDIA finally noticed. So in May 2022, right after the Steam Deck launched, they suddenly open sourced their kernel modules. Which sounds great, except they only released part of the driver. The part that actually makes the graphics work, still closed. It was a PR move, not a solution. But here's what NVIDIA doesn't understand about open source. It doesn't matter how long it takes. The community will win. Because they're not doing this for profit. They're not doing this for recognition. They're doing it out of spite. Okay, real talk. Right now, today, NVIDIA still dominates. They control about 88% of the discrete GPU market, and their stock is valued at over $3 trillion. By almost every financial metric that matters, NVIDIA is winning. But you have to look closer. Take handheld gaming. The Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, the Legion Go. Every major device in that space uses AMD, but because AMD builds integrated CPU and GPU chips that NVIDIA simply does not compete with. NVIDIA never entered that fight, and now, realistically, it is too late. Look at data centers. AMD is making real moves with their Instinct MI300X cards. Are they better than NVIDIA across the board? No. In some workloads, they are competitive, but CUDA still dominates. That part has not changed yet, but something else is changing: developers. Go to any Linux forum and ask a simple question: should I buy NVIDIA or AMD? Then sit back and watch the replies. Almost everyone says AMD, not because AMD cards are always faster, and many benchmarks they are not, but because AMD does not turn a basic driver install into a weekend-long project. Gaming on Linux tells the same story. AMD is now the default recommendation. Every guide, every forum post, every Reddit thread says the same thing. Just buy AMD. And this is where it gets interesting. NVIDIA is playing a short-term game in a very long-term war. Right now, in 20 shares a different story, and that is where they are losing ground. Every new Linux gamer who has a bad NVIDIA experience buys AMD next time. Every Steam Deck competitor chooses AMD, and that adds up. In 5 years, when Linux gaming is 10% of the market instead of 2%, where do you think those users will be? Probably not on NVIDIA. In 10 years, when AI moves beyond CUDA lock-in, where do those researchers go? Again, probably not NVIDIA. So here's my take. This war is not really about drivers anymore. It is about philosophy. NVIDIA believes in control, closed systems, locked ecosystems, their way or the highway. And for a long time that worked, because they made the best GPUs and nobody had a real alternative. The Linux community believes something very different. If you do not cooperate, people will simply build around you. And they are patient. Maybe it takes 5 years, maybe 10. But eventually NVIDIA will look around and realize the world has moved on. AMD, Intel, or someone we have not even heard of yet will take the ground they gave up. Every monopoly has an expiration date. In open source, you either work with the community or you get replaced by it. And in the long run, the community always wins. So yes, Linus was right to call them out. If you are still using NVIDIA on Linux, that makes sense. Maybe you need CUDA, maybe you already own the card. But if you are building a new system in 2025, think twice. Let me know in the comments what you actually think happens next. Do you think NVIDIA eventually opens up and works with the community, even if it means giving up some control? Or do you think they keep things closed until developers, gamers, and researchers slowly move on without them? Because one of those paths is already forming. This is not about brand loyalty or benchmarks or who wins next quarter. It is about how technology evolves over time. Companies change, or ecosystems change without them. So, I am genuinely curious. Which future do you see coming first? NVIDIA adapting, or the community replacing them? Because one way or another, something is definitely coming. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more. I cover stories like this all the time. And check out my other videos for deeper dives into Linux, gaming, and the tech choices that actually matter.